What's up, everyone? Welcome to the video. We're here breaking down the Week 10 NFL DFS slate for DraftKings and FanDuel. It's a 10-gamer, so I feel like it's going to be pretty chalky this week due to the fact that there's only a couple quarterbacks that look like they're actually somewhat playable this weekend. So it could be a bit of a chalk fest, but we'll talk through it here. And if this is your first time visiting, what I like to do in these videos specifically, we go position by position with just a small player pool of the players that I think look the best at each position. We'll build a lineup as we progress through it, more so for a single entry tournament build. Then at the end, I'll run my optimizer that has my projections and ownership projections currently set in place on Friday morning. If you would like access to that, link is down below in the description. And as always, you will start with the quarterback position. Do me a favor, guys, if you do end up enjoying today's video, make sure you leave a like on it because it does go a long way. And if you're brand new, consider subscribing because I'll be here all season long. Anyway, let's talk quarterbacks here. There's only 3 I like this week. Like, it's pretty bad. Like, a 10-game slate. Josh Allen looks like he's going to be very iffy to play. So that limits even more quarterbacks that we have to roster. So it looks like we have Mahomes up top, 2 in the middle, along with Justin Fields. We'll start with Patrick Mahomes here. $7,900 coming off a game versus Tennessee, where he threw the ball just about 70 times in that game, 68 to be exact. And if I'm the Chiefs, that's what I would do too. Why ever run the football? Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Pacheco, he's what he is. He runs hard. Jerick McKinnon can catch some passes, but if I'm the Chiefs, I mean, just have Mahomes throw the ball every single play. He even got it done with his legs as well. I want to say he added around 60 yards on the ground and also got into the end zone. But on the season, 325 passing yards per game, over 2.5 passing touchdowns, throwing the ball close to 40 times per game. Yes, that can be a little bit inflated from last week, but they still throw the ball quite a bit. And he's got great weapons to get the ball to. They just added Kadarius Toney. I think he had 2 catches last week. They're going to get him more involved in the offense. You have the best tight end in football, Travis Kelce, and then a plethora of wide receivers, which is always really hard to gauge which one it's going to be each and every single week. But this is going to be a very popular game for DFS, 50.5 point over-under, which is currently the highest on the slate. Chiefs own the highest implied team total at 30. They are 9.5 point favorites at home, which some people might get worried about a blowout here. But if the team does blow out another team, as I always say, don't be afraid to roster these guys, because if they do blow them out, a guy like Patrick Mahomes had to be a big part of that. So I am just fine with that. We've seen that with Josh Allen a couple times this year. And in those blowouts, you've wanted to have Josh Allen in your lineup. So yes, love Mahomes. I think you can play him in cash games and tournaments, but I do think Justin Fields will be the popular cash game quarterback this week. So I feel like Mahomes might be better for tournaments. Tua here, $6,700. I'm a big Browns fan, but even I know their defense has not been exactly that great this year. Although it sounds like Denzel Ward will return this week. He's been out with a concussion, their star corner, but Tyreek Hill's actually faced him several times, and it usually works out in Tyreek Hill's favor. So I have no concerns here. I think this is actually a pretty good stack. 49.5 point over under in Miami, 26.5 point implied team total, 3.5 point spread. I think, I don't want to call this game sneaky, but I think it's got some pretty good shootout potential here. Cleveland's been able to put up some points this year. Just, Jacoby Brissett's not the most exciting option. If we had Deshaun Watson playing in this game, this would be a really, really fun game to stack up on both sides. But with Jacoby Brissett under center, it's really hard to get excited about stacks with him. So I'd rather go the Tua route, use either Tyreek or Waddle, or use them both and run it back with a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones or Amari Cooper. But looking at the numbers on the season, Cleveland's been kind of mid-pack versus the pass this year. Forgot to mention the matchup for Mahomes. I don't ever care about matchups with him, but so far the Jags this year, 27th versus the pass and 21st versus quarterbacks. But liking Tua here, he's been great this season. And when you have weapons like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and you can also throw in Mike Gesicki, really hard to stop you. So do like Tua in tournaments. And then Justin Fields, if you're playing cash this week, I'd recommend just going that route. I was not very huge on Justin Fields last week, and well, it kind of burned me because he scored over, 40 fantasy points, had that, 61, 65-yard rushing touchdown. Absolutely killed it last week. And over the past month or so now, he's actually been playing some pretty good football. I think, I want to say he's like QB, top 3 in fantasy points scored per game at the quarterback position over the past month now. So yeah, Fields is $6,500 in a dream matchup versus Detroit. You can sign me up for that in cash games. Playing at home, close to a 26 implied team total here on the season, averaging over 50 rushing yards per game. Not going to do too much damage through the air, but the matchup's just so good here, it's hard to ignore. I mean, the Lions are allowing the 4th most points per game in the quarterback position, in addition to being 26th DVA versus the pass and awful versus the run, which obviously Justin Fields will excel at. And moving on over to our lineup, I'll tell you right now, Mahomes is my favorite quarterback on the slate to use, but since I feel like a lot of people will go that route, and I'm not saying a lot of people won't go with Tua as well, but just to get somewhat different here, let's go with the Tua route versus Cleveland. Kind of hurts me doing that versus my favorite team, but it is what it is. And moving on to the running backs, not a super deep position this week, just a handful of guys that I think look somewhat interesting. We'll start up top with the 2 studs, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. Saquon gets that dream matchup versus Houston at home. 23.5 implied team total here for the New York Giants. 5.5-point favorites. And every single time in his career that Saquon Barkley is a favorite, historically, he puts up some pretty monster fantasy games. About 100 rushing yards per game on the season, over 20 carries, and pretty involved in the passing game, sporting just over a 16.5% target share. But really all about the matchup here. I mean, Houston just sucks versus the run. Doesn't matter who it is. Dead last, 32nd DVA versus the run, allowing nearly 35 DraftKings points per game at the position, which is the most, and a massive 154 rushing yards per game with 1.5 rushing touchdowns. So yes, if you have the money for Saquon, he's an excellent play here. I have him currently projected for 22.2 points, which if you do want access to the rest of the projections for the entire player pool, link can be found down below in the description for that, as well as with a cheat sheet, which signifies whether I think they're cash game, tournament plays, and a bunch of other stuff, including an optimizer and all that good stuff, and with the NBA as well, which I do every single day. But yeah, Saquon, it's just a matter of being able to afford him, because if you're going with an expensive quarterback or expensive wide receivers, I get it, you probably can't quite afford Saquon, but projection-wise and just matchup-wise, Saquon checks just about every single box for me. Derrick Henry, $8,300, only a 38.5-point over-under for this game versus the Denver Broncos. 20.5 implied team total here for the Titans, 2.5-point favorites. Playing at home, Derrick Henry's been pretty good the past few weeks now. Killed it versus the Chiefs, then killed it versus the Houston Texans, but everybody kills the Texans. 108 rushing yards per game on the year, about 24 carries and a rushing touchdown. Malik Willis is terrible, so really the only thing you can do is just hand the ball off to Henry. But pretty good matchup on the ground here versus the Broncos. They've been 25th DVA versus the run this season, in 19th versus fantasy running backs. If I had to pick between Henry and Saquon, I'm going to go the Saquon route just because there's more pass catching upside, and the matchup is absolutely a complete dream. And I think the Giants have more scoring opportunities than the Titans in this one, but they're fine plays up top. But personally for me, I feel like I'd rather get to some of these expensive wide receivers instead, like a Tyreek Hill, but I have no issue if you want to go the opposite direction. Heading to the mid-range here, we have Josh Jacobs, $7,600, taking on the Indianapolis Colts at home. They're 4.5-point favorites, 22.5 implied team total. Pretty much gets all the snaps in this backfield, close to 100 rushing yards per game. Going to get you about 20 total opportunities on average per game, and it's a decent chance he's going to find the end zone as well. He's also been pretty highly efficient this year, 5.6 yards per carry. On the matchup, DVA-wise, it's not that great versus the Colts. They're 5th DVA versus the run, but they're also 20th versus fantasy running backs, and they're kind of getting beat up through the air. Close to 6 catches and 50 receiving yards per game, specifically to running backs, which we have seen an increase for Josh Jacobs in the passing game this year, as he's at nearly an 11% target share. I'm not in love with the Jacobs play, but if you're just looking for a mid-range back with some volume, I don't mind him. Alvin Kamara, $7,400. He was terrible in prime time versus the Baltimore Ravens, but always in a nice bounce back spot here versus Pittsburgh. And the great thing about Kamara is you're kind of getting 2 players in one. He's going to get you around 15-ish carries on the ground, but he's also going to be involved in the passing game as well. Going to get you probably around 5 to 8 targets per game. He's seeing 6.5 on the season, about 5 catches and a 21% target share. And while the Steelers have been worse versus the past this season, they're still kind of mid-pack versus running backs. And Alvin Kamara is so dynamic, he can break a slate each and every single week, so I don't mind going there. Travis Etienne, $7,100. The breakout was starting early in the season when James Robinson's snap count was going lower and lower, and his efficiency was dropping. Now with James Robinson gone, Etienne's just really the only guy back there that's going to get the work in. And he has certainly taken advantage of that. The guy has been absolutely killing it the past about month now. He's at 6.2 yards per carry on the season. Pretty good matchup here versus the Chiefs. They're allowing the 4th most points per game to fantasy running backs, and they're also 20th DVA versus the run. And they're allowing nearly 8 catches per game on 55 receiving yards, specifically to running backs, which Etienne is capable of being a nice pass catcher here. So even if the Jags do fall behind and they can't just run the ball with Travis Etienne, he should be in line for some dump-offs here, which is fine on a PPR scoring site like DraftKings. So Etienne, I like him in all formats here. I think he's a great play. He does project quite well for me. Then Dameon Pierce, $6,300. He is currently listed as questionable, but all signs point to him playing. And this price point is just really cheap for a back that's probably going to get you around 20 total touches. He's averaging 17 carries on the season and just around 3 targets. And the matchup here is pretty good versus the New York Giants. They are 24th DVA versus the run, only allowing the 10th fewest points per game to the running back position. That's kind of mainly due to the fact that they're not really giving up too many catches per game or rushing touchdowns, but we're at 111 rushing yards per game, and touchdowns can be quite fluky. But if Dameon Pierce can get us 15 plus carries and just a handful of catches, I shouldn't say catches. If he can get us like 3 to 5 targets, if they are trailing in this game, which I am expecting, that's fine at $6,300. You don't need much. And if he happens to score, you'll be very happy with the output. So moving back over to our lineup, Since I'm using Tua, I have to factor in that I'm probably going to have to play Tyreek Hill, and I'd like to get Jalen Waddle mixed in there, so I don't think I'm going to spend up for a guy like Saquon or Derrick Henry in this build specifically. But I do like Travis Etienne's price point quite a bit, so at $7,100, we'll plug him in. And then at $6,300, Dameon Pierce, yes, he is questionable, but I'm assuming he's going to be good to go. Save some cash there, plug those 2 running backs in, and I feel pretty good about that. And moving on to wide receivers, not as large as a list as usual, though. Keep in mind, there's only 3 quarterbacks I really like this week, so the stacking options are pretty slim. There's some fine one-off guys, but as I always say with wide receivers, it really all comes down to who am I stacking, what quarterbacks am I using, who are run back options with that, because yes, you can dive into the individual matchups, but just feel like it's a bit noisy, to be honest. Like Tyreek Hill, yes, Denzel Ward's back, but I don't care. It's Tyreek Hill, no one can guard him anyway. But anyway, we'll start top here with the 2 Miami guys, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. In the specific build we are building in this video, I do have Tua, so I'm probably just going to plug both of those guys in because that's where the ball goes in that offense. And Cleveland's definitely been beatable this year. And these guys have just been insanely good. Like Tyreek Hill, he's on pace to shatter some records this season, 11 targets per game, 32% target share, 41% market share of the team's air yards, and 122 receiving yards per game. He's absolutely killing it this season. And the Browns this year, 18th DVA versus the pass, mid-pack versus fantasy wide receivers, but I think this game can definitely shoot out. 26.5 point implied team total with only a 3.5 point spread in Miami. So yeah, I'm liking both these guys quite a bit. Jalen Waddle, not too far off of Tyreek Hill, hasn't been as good, but still been really good. And finding the touchdown department, nearly 7.5 targets per game and added receiving yards. Both guys are lead options this weekend. Amon-Ra St. Brown, $1,600. He's definitely cooled off after his really hot start to the year. But his price point, I still think he's fine because he does get good volume, close to 8.5 targets per game. Not going to really do too much in the air yards department this year, only an 8 out of 6.3 this season, but that does make him as a pretty safe overall play. And if you are stacking Justin Fields with a guy like Darnell Mooney, who I do have listed on here in a little bit, Amon-Ra St. Brown's a fine run back option. I mean, I know it doesn't feel great stacking the Bears and the Detroit Lions, but I think it's a viable stack this week because they do have a 48.5 point over-under. Chris Olave, $6,800. No Michael Thomas once again. He's going to be the main guy for Andy Dalton. Pittsburgh's definitely a beatable defense this season. They're actually allowing the most points per game to the wide receiver position at 48 points per game and 212 receiving yards. And Olave this year has been an air yards monster. 14.5 on his ADOT, 1,045 air yards, which I think is still only behind Tyreek Hill and close to a 41% market share of the team's air yards. Amari Cooper, if you are stacking up this Miami game, he is going to be one of the top run back options there because I don't want to play Jacoby Brissett, so I'd rather just, if I'm going to play anybody from Cleveland, it's probably just going to be a guy like Cooper, who has been pretty solid this year. He does have a decent connection with Jacoby Brissett, scoring over half a touchdown per game, 40% market share of the team's air yards, and a really healthy 27% target share. But if you can't quite afford Amari Cooper, I don't mind going down to Donovan Peoples-Jones at $4,300, who has been pretty much scoring double digits for the past month or so now. I know he's not the biggest name out there, but I think Zay Jones is going to be pretty popular at that price point. But I don't think Donovan Peoples-Jones is a bad pivot there. And they're very similar plays. And honestly, I almost feel more comfortable with Peoples-Jones here. But both are fine stacking options, him or Amari Cooper. Just really depends on how much money you have to work with. Juju Smith-Schuster, if you're stacking that game up, he's going to be the top wide receiver I'd want to pair with Patrick Mahomes outside of Travis Kelce. Christian Kirk is going to be the obvious run back option there, and I would expect them to have some pretty high ownership this week just because the Jags are 9-point dogs on the road in KC. They're probably going to throw the ball quite a bit, and the Chiefs have not been good versus wide receivers this season, 26th versus the position and 24th DVA versus the pass. So Kirk looks like a very solid option there, who has kind of rebounded after some pretty poor weeks just a while ago. Darnell Mooney, if you are using Justin Fields and you want to stack him, you can play him naked, but Mooney would be the top stacking option for me. Does have a 40% market share of the team's air yards this season. Zay Jones already kind of hit on him, but if you're just looking for a cheaper Christian Kirk, he's there. Not going to be quite as consistent, but he is seeing close to 7 targets per game. And then Matt Collins with no Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller, he's fine at $4,200. He's had some decent games this year. Can be a bit hit or miss, but the upside is certainly there versus the Colts. But he's definitely a third as far as ranking behind Peoples-Jones and Zay Jones for me. And moving over to our lineup, I know it's simple, guys, but we have Tua, so let's just plug in his 2 pass catching options. We have Tyreek Hill here, $8,100 or $9,100, even more expensive than I thought. Then Jalen Waddle at $7,600. It's expensive. We're at $3,300 left, but we can throw in a cheap defense, probably a cheap tight end, and I think we'll have just enough money to make this work. And moving on to the tight end position, I don't want to say it's a great spot this week, but there is several cheap plays that are kind of just a dime a dozen here. It just kind of depends on what kind of roster construction you are looking at, I mean, Travis Kelce's at the top of the board here. If you're using Mahomes, I'd highly recommend getting Travis Kelce in. I'm playing 3 max this week. I'm either going to play 1 or 2 Mahomes lineups, and Travis Kelce will be in both of those, or one of them, whatever it is. But, I mean, if you're playing Mahomes, you're going to have to tie it to Travis Kelce because he's going to be the main threat there, obviously. And on the season, I mean, 9.5 targets per game, 24% target share. Like, yeah, he's good. You don't need me to tell you that. David Njoku, not sure if he's going to play it. He's currently listed as questionable. I still think he's been a non-participant. He's going to have to get some team drills in or something. We'll see what happens. Today will be pretty important. But if he does play, we know Jacoby Brissett absolutely loves the guy. He is capable of having some pretty big games. But as of right now, looking like a very iffy play. But if he's good to go, he could be a decent contrarian run back option with the Dolphins stack. But again, like I said, very iffy, but only for large field tournaments probably. Tyler Higbee, he's going to project well for me every single week. It's just he doesn't really do much, and the ADOT is so low. The ceiling just seems not where you really want it. I mean, 8 out of 3.1 in the season, a under 10% market share of the team's air yards. 20% target share, though, is good, but has not gotten to the end zone. I think he dropped like a big touchdown the 1 week, couple weeks ago. Is facing Arizona, who does bleed points versus the tight end position. However, they are dead last, 32nd versus tight ends, and 20th David versus the pass. So the matchup's really good, but Stafford's looking pretty questionable right now, and if he happens to be out, Higbee's definitely going to have to be out of consideration for me. Mike Gesicki, $3,500, just doesn't see a ton of volume. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle pretty much steal everything. So if you're fading one of those guys, that's when you can plug in Mike Gesicki. I probably wouldn't play all three. Greg Dulcich, whatever it is here, $3,400. He was looking like the chalk tight end, but with Darren Waller being out, I think that's going to end up being Foster Moreau. But at $3,400, he's been pretty involved in this offense. A pretty nice 23% market share of the team's air yards, 8 out of 13.2, 60 receiving yards per game. Got into the end zone and close to 6 targets per game. Like at $3,400, that's not bad at all. Russell Wilson seems to have at least a decent connection with them. And then the other guy too, whoever the backup was that 1 week, Brett Ripon or whatever it was. Evan Ingram, $3,300, didn't do anything the week prior. He was pretty high owned, but if you're stacking up this game, he is a fine, cheap run back option, but they do have a couple of tight ends that do get involved, which is pretty annoying. Then Foster Moreau, he's probably going to be your cash tight end this week at $3,200. You don't need much out of him, but with no Darren Waller, no Hunter Renfrow, he's just forcing the targets, and that's all you can really ask for at $3,200. And then as far as defenses are concerned, like I always say, I just scroll all the way to the bottom. Let's look at some Vegas totals and see what doesn't look absolutely terrible. So the Vikings, if Josh Allen happens to be out, the total keeps dropping. It sounds like he's probably going to miss this week. They are on the road in Buffalo. Never an easy place to play, but if Josh Allen happens to be out, Vikings are going to be the chalk defense. I actually have them projected around 7 points, and that's by far the best point projected defense on the slate. And they pretty much allow you to do a lot of things because there's a big difference between paying like $3,300 for a defense and $2,200. It definitely opens up an extra, maybe not a stud, but another solid play in your lineup for sure. So the Vikings would be the easy play there if Case Keenum starts. Other defenses that look somewhat viable, the Cardinals don't look bad versus the Rams. They could potentially be going up against a backup quarterback, but even if Stafford plays, I'm fine with that at $2,700. The Titans are another defense I don't think looks too bad, $3,200 versus Russell Wilson, who he sucks this year. They're playing at home. And only an 18-point implied team total against them, which is the lowest that we've talked about so far. It's actually tied for the lowest on the slate with the Giants and the Raiders, the teams they are facing as well. So the 3 defenses I think look the best, probably going to be the Titans, Cardinals, and the Minnesota Vikings. So moving back over to our lineup here, let's see what kind of money we have to work with after we plug in a cheap defense. I'm going to scroll all the way down, plug in the Vikings. That opens some things up. It's just around $3,600. Going to have to plug in a cheap tight end. I'm fine with Dulcich or Foster Moreau here. I'm going to go with Foster. $3,900. It's a bit of a stretch. You might actually have to drop somebody because I'm not sure this is going to work out. If we have to drop Tyreek Hill, I guess we can do it. We'll still have Jalen Waddle, but it is what it is. He's just so freaking expensive. But we need a run back option with him. We obviously can't afford Amari Cooper. We're going to go Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's $4,300. Man, that really sucks. $3,500. We could drop Tyreek Hill. We could also drop Jalen Waddle. I mean, we can do 2 scenarios here. So if you drop Tyreek Hill and we dropped it to more of a mid-range guy like a Sam Brown or a Chris Olave, let's just go Sam Brown in this scenario. That leaves you $5,700 left in the flex spot, and that definitely feels a little bit better. You have guys like Darnell Mooney, Najee Harris, who I just don't think I could click on Najee Harris's name, but it definitely makes it just a little bit easier. You're just missing out on a guy like Christian Kirk or Deontay Johnson. But if we happen to keep Tyreek Hill and we drop Jalen Waddle, it's about 55 for the last couple of spots. I like plugging in a guy like, we could go the Christian Kirk route. You could also get a Juju Smith-Schuster or Darnell Mooney, but it definitely makes it a little more flexible if you don't do the double stack. But it's just really appealing because I really would hate not to have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle with Tua. There might be a way to make it work. We could drop to maybe a cheaper running back outside of Travis Etienne, but it's something I probably wouldn't feel too comfortable with outside of a large field tournament. Like I said in the beginning, I do want on the optimizer, see who's popping the most as of right now, and obviously things can change by the time kickoff rolls around on Sunday. So if you do want the updates, like I said, you can sign up, link down below, and you can build your own lineups here, but just want to see who's popping the most as of right now. So yeah, that's a lot of Dameon Pierce, tons of Zay Jones, a lot of Derrick Henry, a lot more than what I would have expected. I would not personally play that much. Lots of Vikings. Najee Harris, while he is cheap, I can't play the guy. He just sucks. So it's one of those things where I'm not really agreeing with the projections too much this week. Normally I do, but I'm not a slave to them. I will kind of deviate away when I think, or at least I don't agree with them sometimes. Justin Fields, though, I get great matchup versus Detroit. Lots of Tyreek Hill, Foster Moreau, Higbee, Mahomes. So not too surprised about some of these guys that came up, but I am kind of shocked at all the Derrick Henry. I understand Zay Jones at the price point, but Najee Harris and Henry were kind of the two more surprising ones there for sure. With that being said, guys, that's all I got for today's video. If you did enjoy, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so, and I'll see you all next time.